Sherman, City of Happy Valley City Councilor, also co-chair of this meeting, and I'll hand it off to Commissioner Mitchell.
Mike Mitchell, Oregon City.
About Mr. Cernak.
Kenny Cernak, Hamlet of Beaver Creek, representing CPOs.
Councilor Stevensjord.
Hello, everyone. Rebecca Stevensjord, City of Milwaukee.
And Mayor Milch.
Michael Milch, Mayor of Gladstone.
Great. Councilor Sherman, I'll turn it over to you. I see Mayor Buck's joining us, so we'll let him go too, but I'll turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mayor Buck, good morning. Joe Buck, City of Lake Oswego, fine looking guy all around, running, sending me nuisance emails about running for mayor again. I don't know. It's good to see you. Good morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, July 17th. This is the C4 Metro Subcommittee. Great to have you all on board at this fine, beautiful, sunny morning. And so we've got a nice calendar of good stuff. So why don't we start off? I see that Grace Cho is here from Metro. So we will kick it off with a JPAC update, specifically the RFFA update and next steps. Ms. Cho, good morning.
Good morning, Councilor Sherman and the rest of the C4 committee members. I just want to make sure, is everyone hearing me okay? Is my audio and everything working? Great. Thank you perfect. Thank you so much for inviting me today this morning. I'm here to give a brief overview of the next steps as it relates to the development of the 2028 through 2030 Regional Flexible Fund allocation, or what Councilor Sherman had mentioned as we affectionately call RUFA. And more specifically, I was planning to dive into some of the next steps as it relates to the development of a new project bond proposal for the region to consider, but also happy to entertain any questions today about the Step 2 allocation to local projects. So as part of the materials for the C4 meeting was about a 3-page memo that was submitted to JPAC for tomorrow's JPAC meeting. And so I'm just going to really kind of walk through that memo and just talk a little bit about the components of each. Just to, again, I always feel like it's good to ground ourselves when we walk into this discussion about the regional flexible funds, just to quickly remind ourselves what it is. It's federal transportation dollars that Metro, as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, has the authority to allocate to transportation projects and programs throughout the Portland Metro region. It comprises of about 5% of our overall transportation funding in a given 3-year period. And the estimated amount for the upcoming cycle is about $153 million overall. Typically, Metro allocates the regional flexible funds in what we call a 2-step process, or a 2-step manner. We have step 1 that typically comprises of our debt servicing, as well as the continuation of operating and administering region-wide programs and planning activities. These are probably programs that your staff have been involved with, including regional travel options, transit-oriented development, the Transportation System Management and Operations Program, et cetera. So those are what we typically call step 1. And then we have what we call step 2, which is another area where your staff is probably very familiar, and that's our competitive grant allocation to local transportation projects. So Clackamas County, or the Clackamas County region, has actually seen a lot of success in our step 2 processes in the past. I'm just trying to think through some different projects that have been funded, components like the trolley trail, some active transportation upgrades on Jennings Avenue. So lots of some upgrades as well on Malala Avenue in the last couple of years. So yeah, it's pretty exciting time that we're walking into this process. So last month, your representatives on JPAC actually took an action to adopt the program direction for our regional flexible fund allocation. And as part of that action, it actually kicked off kind of 2 key two key activities for us moving forward into the flexible fund process now. The first is that development of a new project bond proposal. And this really emerged again out of an opportunity that we saw, or that the region had seen, because we saw that some previous commitments of bonding and debt servicing, the debt repayment schedule was actually going to finish starting in the fiscal years that we're talking about for this cycle, starting in 2028. So recognizing that there's a number of transportation projects that the region seeks to implement in order to meet our overall regional transportation goals and vision, the discussion of possibly making another decision to commit future regional flexible funds with the idea that we're advancing funds forward to be able to implement regional projects faster is essentially what was provided as permission as part of the action to adopt the regional, the program direction last month. And then the other component, a little bit more straightforward, is that now we're really launching into that step 2 competitive allocation process. All of this is looking to take place over the course of the next year, which there's a timeline attached to. It's the very last page of that JPAC memo that walks through it. It focuses, again, specifically on the bond development proposal, but it largely is consistent with the same timeline that we look to allocate the step 2 funds, with just a handful of different steps. So it'll be a very busy July to July, needless to say. Moving then forward, I'll just run through all of this very quickly and then take any questions. We're really looking to conduct the development of the bond proposal over the course of what we consider 5 phases of work. We're actually in that first phase. It's our process communication. This is a little bit new as to how we're approaching the development of this bond proposal, where we're trying to bring it through the committee structure a bit more formally and regularly, and giving more of a, providing a much more, trying to provide a bit more of a transparent process around the development of this bond proposal. So recognizing this is new, we are just trying to communicate with our regional partners as effectively as we can what the plan is over the course of the next year. Following this month, or actually at the very end of this month, we then transition into the next phase of that new bond development process, new bond proposal development process. And that's what we're calling the candidate identification process. And this is really where we are holding an open call for nominations starting on July 26th, and it'll run till September 6th. Now, per the purpose and principles that were adopted in our program direction, the focus of our new, the development of the new bond proposal is really centered around transit. And there's kind of stratified categories within that framework that we're looking to develop the bond proposal, but we do want to open up the opportunity to listen to different ideas as to what our regional partners would want to consider for the bond nominee, having consideration for bond proceeds, essentially. So important dates, the opening is that nomination process is on July 26th, and the closing date is on September 6th. Following the nominations, Metro staff will actually enter into a screening process to ensure that all the nominated candidates are meeting the various minimum requirements that we're requesting as part of the bond for consideration for bond proceeds, as well as also wanting to, it's mainly to ensure that we're meeting minimum requirements, but the timing of why we're doing this as early as we are is that we want to also be able to offer any guidance or opportunities in case we do see a candidate that throws its name into the bond nomination process, which actually may be a really good candidate for step 2, or say another active grant opportunity that's in progress. I believe the Oregon Department of Transportation right now statewide is running their community pass grant solicitation as well. So again, we want to just be able to stagger a little bit to be able to kind of offer up some opportunities around that. So the results of that screening we anticipate to have completed no later than early October. That still gives a little bit of window in that step 2 nomination process if we do make some recommendations moving into that other direction. But then again, focusing back on the bond, once we actually complete that screening process, we'll notify the candidates that are moving forward and we'll request some follow-up information to then help us move into what we're calling a project evaluation process, and then the development of what we're calling the bond scenarios or the bond scenario analysis. And that's really where we will look at the individual projects to understand how they are helping to make meaningful progress towards our regional transportation plan goals, understand how they are, how well they are aligning to, again, those the purpose and principles of the bond as adopted in the program direction, and then looking at an aspect of readiness, since we are asking this question of making a commitment of future funds to advance earlier. So we really want to be able to see that these funds get expended at a in a near-term time frame. So following that analysis, we'll look at the ratings of the individual projects. And then we'll also be balancing in consideration that we want good representation of projects coming from the 3 different project categories that we identified for as part of the bond development process, as well as representation of investments across the region. So we'll be kind of factoring some different pieces together. And from there, that's what's really going to help to build some different concepts around the bond scenarios. And the bond scenarios is really the most probably critical part of this process, which really begins to lay down, okay, if we looked at this mix of projects and then this mix of this mix of projects, this mix of projects, and this mix of projects, what would be, say, the debt servicing need and schedule? And is that something we can actually sustain and meet? Can we actually make bond proceeds available per the schedule that each of these different projects are asking for us to make funds and proceeds available? So it's that big financial analysis that's going to be the most critical. Once we have the bond scenario analysis complete, we'll then move into the next phase, which is what we're calling the preferred proposal selection and public comment period. This is where we actually will be, the first time we'll be asking for JPAC action. And as part of that JPAC action, we will ask for, through a TPAC recommendation, we'll ask JPAC to select a preferred bond scenario that we will then release for public comment in the spring of 2025. So that won't be necessarily the first peak of all of the bond scenarios. We're actually anticipating coming in February of next year with some of the analysis results from the bond scenarios and giving time for deliberation, but asking for that action coming the following month. Following the public comment period, we then actually will take those public comments, summarize the responses, provide it back to our regional partners. If there's any kind of recommendations or responses that we really feel need to be addressed per the public comment, Metro staff will come out with those recommendations or draft responses for review. But ultimately, following that public comment period, we then enter into a deliberation process for the majority of the spring into summer of next year. And this is really where as regional partners, you'll have the opportunity to discuss and really help us think through whether or not we want to actually carry forward the proposal, the preferred bond proposal as developed. Are there some tinkering on the edges, etc.? So that was a very, very exciting walkthrough of the process thus far. I apologize. I think I might have. There were 2 things I know I wanted to make sure I made note of as part of this presentation. I want to note that during the candidate nomination, since it is the first thing coming up, that there are no limits on any sort of project applications. So we're just asking folks to submit depending on the type of candidate project that they'd like to submit. They might be asked to submit an application form, or they might be asked to actually schedule some sit down time with Metro staff to actually have a conversation about their project idea. And then the other thing I wanted to note, because it was a question raised last month at JPAC, is that we're still defining our public involvement process beyond just the formal public comment that we anticipate having in the spring of 2025. We are anticipating some sort of public comment opportunity somewhere in the frame of either on the projects and the evaluation of the list of projects that are being evaluated and considered for the bond scenarios, or at the bond scenario timeframe. Again, unfortunately, we haven't quite settled yet, so I can't definitively say what that looks like. But we do anticipate having another bond specific commenting opportunity. And with that, I am happy to take any questions, whether it's about the bond. I know I did not speak a lot to step 2, but I'm happy to take any of those questions as well.
Very good. Thank you for the information. Mayor Milch, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Grace. You kind of got in the weeds on what I think is the funding part of this, which I consider to be, Metro's job. I assume that has to do with the amounts that you're going to go in debt, the interest rates, the length of time these things will be funded over, and that may depend on the individual project, how you choose to orchestrate that. But the thing for us to think about is nominating projects. And let me clarify, did you say your emphasis now is on transit related projects, like say getting bus lines in Happy Valley to serve some of the new homes being built there? Or are you open to, transit oriented development, or sidewalks, recreational transportation at a local level? What kinds of projects should cities be thinking about if we hope to submit something by the July 26th date?
Sure, absolutely. And the date, I believe, is September 6th. We'll have the actual nomination process open starting at the end of this month. But in terms of the specifics on the types of transportation projects, we have, as part of the adoption of the program direction, there are 3 project categories that we're aiming to look at. The first is what we're calling the capital investment grant, and like large transit capital leverage type projects. These are typically like your larger scale, big transit or bigger transit infrastructure type projects that we're aiming to actually leverage different federal discretionary dollars that are available through various programs. One being very specific, and that's the Federal Transit Administration's Capital Investment Grant Program, which this region has been highly successful at being able to leverage those funds. The second category is something called first last mile or safe access to transit. This is really focused on what you might consider those transit supportive elements to really make transit work. And that's where we're really talking about finishing those sidewalk gaps along a transit corridor. Maybe it's upgraded lighting, better access improvements specifically around a transit stop. So maybe it's like on a corridor that doesn't have a proper ADA curb ramp or something like that. So thinking about that, but kind of holistically in the sense that instead of maybe a small set of projects, or a small individual project for like, oh, we have this one sidewalk gap and like a couple of things here, maybe thinking about like an extended longer corridor where those types of upgrades might want to be completed. And then the third category is the transit vehicle priority. This is really where we're looking at, again, it's a little bit of a mix of those transit supportive elements, but also the use of technologies to help essentially move transit faster through the system and making it much more reliable so it's a better user experience. So good examples of that could be transit signal priority, where at an intersection there's the priority light. Or another example that I think is very applicable in Clackamas County is actually the work that the partnership ODOT and SMART are currently doing around bus on shoulder and doing some piloting work around that concept. So again, helping to move that transit faster through the system, as well as, sometimes things as simple as like a bus pullout in a sidewalk. Or if the right of way is available, it's expensive to do something like that, but it helps to again, make the system work a little better. So those are some different concepts we have, but I want to be very encouraging in saying if partners have other concepts, please reach out to staff and we can schedule a time to have a discussion and talk through those different project ideas and see if it would make sense as a good application candidate for the bond proceeds.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Savis.
Yeah, thank you, Grace, for your presentation this morning. Good to see you. You've heard me perhaps say some of the things I'm going to say this morning before. However, the schedule that's in the packet that you referenced doesn't really distinguish on very many of those dates which one is the step 1 process and which one is the step 2 process. So it's hard to discern what those opening dates are, closing dates are. But in general, just want to say that, it does pain me a little bit that we're not really keeping these flexible funds as flexible as they could be. I think that ship may have already sailed. But as a nature of how this MPO is structured, JPAC seems to be not as involved as the Metro Council. That makes sense. We're only part-timers. But from a representative standpoint, which is where I'm going with this, the structure of the MPO or the JPAC committee is one county representative and one city representative, and each of our counties have more than one city. So it takes time to get the word out and take those concepts as you suggested, and to vet them and to create opportunities or to look at opportunities, especially during the summer when staff and counselors and everyone seems to be on vacation. It seems a very difficult time to get anything done. But again, maybe that ship has sailed too, but I see obviously the opening date of July 26th is, don't have any quarrel with that, but I think it's really more the closing of that opportunity is pretty fast. And this is moving very fast for the step 1 process. And I'm just, just hoping that there can be a little bit more flexibility in some of those dates to allow our staff, because, things don't really get moving again staff-wise and attendance and everything until, October, frankly. So I just think the timing of this is moving pretty quick. And I really wonder if that's really necessary that we move so fast, at least on the point of the closure of project nominations for step 1. And I would again request that the calendar be have some kind of a signification of what step 1 is, those dates, and what is step 2.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Savis. I know that as part of the JPAC materials, the calendar we sent was just specifically focused on the activity related to the new project bond development, and that's what we're calling step 1A.1 to distinguish from the existing step 1. That's our current commitments as it relates to debt servicing and bond repayment for bond proceeds prior. We are aiming to put together some sort of combined step 1 and step 2 calendar and hopefully have it not look like a mess. So then it helps actually our partners better clearly see the various dates as it relates to the two REFA activities, which I want to recognize are happening in parallel of each other and is and is a lot of effort. We've heard some comments earlier from our from the TPAC representatives in regards to the schedule, and we are taking that, hearing that, and taking that into consideration. As we will, this is something I will take back and take back to our internal team and discuss, what opportunities there may be. I just want to note that some of the rationale that's been put forward as part of the schedule concept was trying to recognize, because we have two parallel processes happening at once as it relates to the development or the completion of this regional flexible fund allocation. We all wanted to be mindful of the capacity constraints that both of these processes would actually be putting on our regional partners and staff amongst the regional partners, because we have essentially two open application periods for projects, and it was just trying to make an effort to try to stagger some of those activities. And in particular, we did want to have that open opportunity where maybe a bond candidate is a project is considered brought up as an idea as a bond candidate, but actually it may better serve in the step 2 criteria. And we still wanted to leave a window of being able to say, hey, this project should really move forward in the step 2 process. What can we do to help, shepherd that that process? So, but I want to be mindful and acknowledge what we've heard about the schedule, because it is fast, and we're really aiming to get this completed by summer of next year, just knowing that we then need to transition immediately into the MTIP development and process. And the more that we delay some of that decision, the more that actually puts stress on that process and essentially getting our TIP included in the STIP as well. Excuse me, as I use a couple of acronyms here, a quarter in the jar. But those are also incredibly important documents, recognizing they need to be adopted to be able to access and release those federal funds.
Yep. Thanks, Grace. Just quickly, and no need to respond to this, but I just want to just point out again, make it very clear that with one county seat and one city seat, each of us are taxed to get the word out to all the cities, 15 in Clackamas County, some of which are not in the metro boundary. I get that. However, to get the word out to those council members, to those staff, to get those ideas, by the time the word gets out, the deadline's probably passed.
Very good. Thanks for the comments, Commissioner Savas. One question, Grace. So I know that for the step 2 grants, the local competitive, Metro has offered up technical assistance as part of this process. Is there, will you be kind of publishing an array of things, types of assistance that we can have, versus just kind of we randomly ask questions and hope to get some assistance? It's one of those things, you don't know what you don't know. So if we know what's available, that can help us as part of this process. Have we kind of considered that?
Yes, we plan on actually having all the instructions and materials posted as it relates to the step 2 technical assistance available, and we'll actually be pushing probably an email communication out through our various the JPAC and TPAC interested parties list, and through our various channels. And the instructions prior to that pre-application period, which we have set for August. And as part of that, I can just very briefly preview is that we are currently getting a consultant onboarded to be available to provide technical assistance. We've outlined a couple of key pieces of assistance areas that we think are most critical for the step 2 application. And one of those areas is supporting some cost estimating as it relates to the project applicant itself. So that's kind of one area I can kind of speak to. Probably some other things we still are finalizing with our consultant, but We do plan to have that published very soon, prior to August 12th, but hopefully actually sooner. I'm actually hoping we can have everything starting to get published on our website by the end of July.
Okay, I'm sure we'll be following up with you on that topic. I'll keep this moving along. Ms. Burek.
So I just wanted to highlight to everyone that within your packet, the C4 Metro packet today, there are copies of actually the schedule, both that Grace went over, and that was on page 8 of your packet. It is the schedule for the step 1. And then on page 22 is the schedule for step 2. So right now what we have are 2 separate schedules, but we have them both available to us. And so in the portion of the meeting where we were going to give a feedback on TPAC, we were going to touch a little bit more deeply on the step 2 items because we knew that Grace was going to talk about the step 1 today. So I just wanted to let you guys know.
Very good. Thank you for that information. We, of course, we should never doubt you that you got the information up and ready to rock and roll for us. So thank you very much for that. Mayor Buck.
Thanks, Councilor Sherman. I just had a question. With the projects, step 2 projects that were previously funded for more like on the construction phase, have any of those had trouble completing their projects due to the rising cost of construction?
Yes, we have actually seen that, particularly projects that were maybe awarded just prior to the beginning of the pandemic. And then, nobody could have predicted the rapid increase of inflation and essentially trying to deliver projects within that time frame. As part of actions also taken per the recommendation by members here, Metro did approve an allocation for redistribution funds. So we're making some, just brief context, these are funds that we are awarded because we're actually doing well with getting regional flexible fund awarded projects obligated through the federal aid system. And so essentially from the Fed's perspective, it's getting money out the door. There's this incentive system that states that don't typically obligate all their funds, other states that do obligate their funds have the ability to take in some of that extra obligation capacity. The Oregon Department of Transportation helps to incentivize as regional partners that obligation activity and shares with us when we are obligating our projects in a on time and on schedule. They share in the wealth, I guess is the way to say it. Knowing that there are projects that have experienced quite like their cost estimates have been really skewed as a result of what's happened because of inflation, we have made some of the redistribution funds available to those projects affected. And I apologize. Beyond that, I don't know if I can actually speak to any other details beyond that. I know there's about $10 million available, but I'm trying to recall desperately what Ted has mentioned thus far about any kind of process as it relates to the allocation of that $10 million available to be able to help bridge some of those gaps on those previously awarded projects.
Gotcha. Well, are there any projects that can't move forward because they don't have the funding?
Well, I believe with redistribution, there are some kind of principles around how to, in terms of the desire to how to allocate those $10 million in funds towards those regional flexible fund projects that are, struggling to actually move forward or get delivered. Again, I apologize. I can't speak to them off the top of my head. And so I will actually bring your question to Ted to be able to follow up with you directly.
Just one more quick question. And I may have just missed it. What is the total step 2 bucket value?
Yeah, actually a little bit of a challenging question to be able to answer. And that's dependent on the outcomes of what bond proposal moves forward as part of this process will actually implicate the amount of step 2 funding available for the competitive process to local projects. The estimated range right now is anywhere between $47 to $60 million. $60 million assumes that we do not move forward with a new project bond. I don't know whether that's going to be the case or not. We're moving forward with the development of a bond proposal, but if it doesn't get approved, then it could be upwards at that 60 million mark. So yeah, that's kind of the range we're looking in.
Very good. Thank you for the information. We've got a full rest of our schedule today, so we're going to close this conversation out. Ms. Cho, thank you so much for coming. Next up on our a list of items, and you're welcome back anytime. We also know how to find you, so thank you very much. Next up is our 2025 transportation package, JPACT priorities discussion with Jamie Stasny. I don't see her on the screen yet, but I know Karen is going to be bringing up in just a moment. In theory. There we go. Jamie, good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you all. I'm here to share with you a quick update on another JPACT item, which is the draft version of, what are they calling it? JPACT priorities for the state 25 transportation package. We're all calling these different things. Many of you attended the C4 retreat where we talked about values and outcomes for Clackamas County as we approach the 25 state transportation package formation. JPACT has decided to put together a list as well. This has been drafted in partnership with all of the jurisdictions with the lobbyist group, the state lobbyist group, as well as some of the local policy folks. And that draft document, I'm going to put a link in the chat, is available for review. It will be discussed at the JPAC meeting. This is not an action. This is just the first discussion. Link is in the chat if you want to check out the document. I can also screen share if you guys want to go through it, but essentially a very high level document, trying not to get into the weeds or talk about projects, but keep it high enough level so everyone can stay on the same page. They essentially organized 6 different topic areas in which to have positions. First is short-term funding solutions. So I actually am going to screen share because this is easier than me just reading this to you guys. Oh, can't share. Karen, can you make it so I could share, please? Thank you. Short-term funding solutions, long-term sustainable funding to finish what we started, safe urban arterials and main streets, transit, and resiliency. Those are the categories that they have drafted. This is a pretty simple 2-page document. As I mentioned, this is going to be up for discussion at the next JPAC meeting, and then later on, they're going to work toward adoption of this. They are going to be taking amendments to this after the JPAC meeting, minor amendments. So this is the document itself that I linked in the chat. These are the categories. So as I mentioned, short-term funding solutions. The focus there is to stabilize the existing state and local transportation system funding sources so we can prioritize the operations and maintenance of our existing facilities, including retention of the existing 50-30-20 state highway fund revenue split. So that's the first focus area. The second is long-term sustainable funding. The recommendation is to invest in developing long-term sustainable revenue solutions to provide much needed state and local operations and maintenance dollars for multimodal investments into the future, and to ensure local agencies maintain local taxing authority for new types of funding and continue to receive a proportionate local share of all applicable revenues. I will note that in conversation with Commissioner Savis, he found this last sentence to be a little bit confusing and vague. What does that mean? And so we did draft an amendment to this, which will be considered in the next version, that says, ensure local agencies maintain taxing authority. And I think we added the opportunity to expand local taxing authority. And then we made this a new sentence and said, continue to receive a proportionate local share of all applicable state collected transportation revenues. So just getting a little more specific about that. I did have a conversation with folks at Metro about this. That is the intent of this language, but it is a little bit unclear. What is a proportionate local share? What does that mean? What are these applicable revenues? Which ones are applicable and which ones aren't? That's a little bit confusing. So we may get more specific on this last sentence and see some changes there. Next one's pretty simple. Finish what we started. Let's build government trust and accountability by ensuring the successful completion and leveraging of federal funds available for the major bottleneck projects identified in HB 2017. Then safe urban arterials and main streets, increase investment in safety-focused state programs like Great Streets that prioritize complete solutions to improving the most dangerous urban arterials through a single program. Prioritize safety on major travel corridors where developing housing and job opportunities compound the disrepair. So these are the areas around the edge where growth is occurring quickly and the infrastructure is definitely subpar and needs some investment. Next is transit, increase state funding options for transit capital and operations to improve and expand transit service statewide. Access to reliable, affordable, and convenient transit, vital to ensuring that Oregon's transportation system is equitable and reduces climate impacts. Then resiliency, ensure that our critical transportation infrastructure like airports and bridges are able to withstand large-scale known and unknown climate and natural disasters and adapt infrastructure for the needs of future generations. So very high-level policy statements. I think it's in alignment with the draft C4 values and outcomes that we developed at the retreat. Don't see anything really conflicting here, just a little different way of saying some of the same things. So that is the overview of what's being brought forward. As I mentioned, this is the first time that JPACT will be discussing this at their Thursday meeting, and then there will be an opportunity for minor edits. After that, they will work toward adoption. I believe their target is to adopt this in September.
Very good. Mayor Milch, your hand is up.
Thank you, Jamie. I did see a lot of consistency between this document and then what we prepared at the C4 retreat, which is encouraging, but I just wonder, sometimes it's easier to see what's there than what's not there. You said a lot of jurisdictions involved. I assume that means Washington County and Multnomah County contributed to the creation of this. Were there any differences from the representatives of those jurisdictions on their outlook on this larger transportation issue?
No, I would say this document was generated with input from all three counties, from Metro. City of Portland gave some input and feedback into this. So I think everyone's perspectives are represented here, which I agree with you, Mayor Milch, is a positive thing since it does closely align with our C4 values and outcomes. It shows that kind of our region is aligned in what we want to see. I think the areas where things will kind of get a little more challenging will be this conversation about O&M, operations and maintenance. There's a huge focus on operations and maintenance. And to be completely honest, and we discussed this at the retreat, because we have so much growth happening in Clackamas County and a lot of it around the edge, we need capital funds. We need money to actually build infrastructure. And so that will become likely a challenging conversation later on if the whole focus is on operations and maintenance and there's no discussion about the capital needs around the edges especially. But I think both of those things are captured here. And everyone was really supportive of making sure that the whole region's perspective was represented. So I think we're well aligned. I do think there'll be a few things like that that start to get a little scritchy as we get down to the details of the package.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Stavanger.
Jamie, thank you. This is really helpful. I had a question just about language and intent around the draft value and outcome document that C4 put together with regard to capital projects from House Bill 2017. So the language there says finish legislatively directed capital projects, and the language in the JPACT document really focuses on bottlenecks that were identified. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective and maybe from others in this group, if those are aligned in terms of our intent or if there's some additional clarification that's needed.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just my perspective on that. I think we're all trying to say the same things. but we're using slightly different words. So we could consider a tweak to either one of these documents. I would ask you, Councillor Savage, is there one of those sets of language that seems to make more sense or thread the needle better than the other in your perspective?
Well, so I guess when I think about the specific language in the JPEG document, that focuses in on bottlenecks, that seems to resonate a bit more with me than kind of overall capital projects, because there's actually quite a bit that was outlined in House Bill 2017, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure the timeline in which we would be able to find funding for all of those projects, or if we would be able to find funding for all those projects. So I wonder about, C4's willingness to kind of narrow that down a bit, or if you feel like that's an appropriate frame and the JPAC conversation serves to narrow it down. So I guess, I'm always a fan of more specificity, especially when it comes to things that have been unfunded, either mandates or goals. Because if we have a more clear direction and a more specific definition for what we're looking to accomplish together, then we're probably more likely to get to that point, rather, starting with kind of a larger net.
Very good.
Yeah, I think that's
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Please.
sorry. I was just going to say, I think that's a really great point. And I just pulled up the values and outcomes document that we have. It does say legislatively directed capital projects from HB 2017 and HB 3055, which could be a little bit broader. I think the document from JPAC talking about the bottlenecks is talking about what we called, when I started anyway, the projects of statewide significance, which were 217, which is already going to be completed, but then Rose Quarter and 205, including the third lane. And I think, and maybe this is sets us up for a good conversation at C4, would be good to get more specific about which projects specifically we want to see done. I think those are the ones that we're talking about, but that could be confusing with that general language. So thank you for raising that. And I will let Trent know that's something we need to address at the C4 meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Savas, we'll give you the last words on this topic today.
Okay, great. Well, just to build on what the conversation we're having right now raised by Councillor Savinger, I don't disagree. Maybe compromise language could be with specificity. What that would have specificity would be the three major bottleneck projects identified in HB 2017. That would add clarity as to what we're discussing. And then, there are terms that have been have grown out of that period of time of HB 2017, where, for example, the I-205 project was split into two phases. Well, fixing the bridge is one bottleneck, but the lanes are the other part of the bottleneck. So the bottleneck will still exist. It'll just be, a quarter mile shorter than it was before, because that bridge isn't very long. So, I agree, having some clarity would be a good idea in both documents. But what I did raise my hand in particular was Mayor Buck, tomorrow on that one bullet point that Jamie spoke to a little bit that I had concerns over on the long-term funding bullet. I would appreciate your help tomorrow, and maybe between now and tomorrow, Jamie, we can get some clear language that we all can agree on and advocate for tomorrow morning with regards to clarifying, and maybe it should be separated by bullets, I don't know, or sub bullets, and that being, that local share or opportunity to increase local funding opportunities, whether that's counties or cities, that would be great. But to intermix them with regard to proportional share language, that might look different, right? So if it's for new revenues, but in the short-term funding, we identified 50-30-20 for state funding, or the state highway fund, I guess. But some clarification there would be helpful. If we're going to put it in short-term funding, we should put it in long-term funding as well. But somehow clean that up. It might be a little bit more lengthy, but having it more clear would be a benefit, and having it ready to go before tomorrow morning would be helpful. Oh, okay, great, thank you. Sure.
So I just screen shared quickly. Sorry, Councilor Sherman, just wanted to get this out there real quick. If we can nip it in the bud today. We did draft some language. I did share this with some of the staff over at Metro, and so they already have this information. I think you can bring this up or a version of this up tomorrow. Everyone's already aware and they're open to incorporating this in the next version. But if you want to see some tweaks to this, it would be good to know before tomorrow so that I could update this staff.
Yeah, so friends here this morning, I'm just gonna ask the question, should that sentence really say, I appreciate the edit, but building off the edit, where it says continue to receive the 50-30-20 split for all state collected revenues. Would that be more clear? As is in the short-term funding line.
Like it's less ambiguous, you know, it's more specific.
Right. You could almost take that that last sentence of the short-term funding bullet and just insert it after continue to receive, or and retain. So just after ensure that local agencies continue to receive the problem is we're mixing the local agencies, and that goes into the prior sentence, and that was the confusing piece. But if it's, ensure that we continue to receive or continue to retain the existing 50-30-20 funding split on state collected revenues, that would help. So maybe one more tweak. Mayor Buck, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, what is are we talking just about the gas tax? What is the local taxing authority?
Well, the local taxing authority and the state taxing authority are two different things, right? And that's why you're getting as confused as I was for the very same reason, because they're being intermixed in the same paragraph. So if the goal is to ensure the second to last sentence, to ensure local agencies maintain and expand taxing authority, great. Maybe we could put that sentence last and then switch the order.
Well, what is the taxing authority though? I mean, specifically, is it just I'm thinking like, what is the tax authority around transportation for local agencies?
Okay,
is it just gas tax, right?
Yeah, great question. So for example, cities can incorporate a gas tax, counties cannot. Okay, so you would own that. Counties can raise the vehicle registration fee, cities cannot. As an example. But
yeah.
So
and that's kind of it though,
there's
right?
an example.
I mean but that's really, it's very limited. There's not a plethora of taxing options.
Although
This
it does
actually-
say expand to potentially add new options too.
And this came from our partners in Washington County who have the tool called MISTIP, right?
Mm.
They have that already and they want to keep that and make sure that that doesn't go away. So this was something that they've included in their Washington County specific values that they're going to be bringing forward to the 25 package. So this is really inspired by them.
Yeah, so I mean, just real quick, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I'm just wondering if maybe flipping the order would be of benefit, where we just take that ensure local agency, and just put that last, and then just had that statement say ensure. Whoops, where we go? You're moving around. And then I guess somehow get that retain the existing highway fund for state collected revenues.
So I will make that tweak. And I think I can make that change, just being more specific. I will say we did have a bit of this discussion among the staff. I think we were sort of pushing for that too. Let's get certainty. That's what we're used to. Let's make sure we put it in there. And there was some pushback on the other side because what new revenue forms are going to come forward, and is 50-30-20 always the right number and the right split? That question was brought forward. Do we want to leave ourselves some flexibility to be nimble and not just say we only like it if it's 50-30-20? So that's why it ended up being a little bit more vague, to give us room to be flexible and consider other options without just kind of coming out and saying no out of the gate.
I think those are valid points. Why, Jamie, do you want to take a shot at this and then just huddle back up with Commissioner Savas offline after the meeting?
Will do.
Okay.
And Mayor Buck and Councilor Sherman, I can include you in that email as well, just in case you have other tweaks.
That sounds good. That would be great. Mayor Buck, your hand is still up. Do you want? Okay.
Well, I just had one. I just one thing on the transit aspect of this. And I brought this up a couple times. It seems like there's a movement to increase the STIF, and we, especially in Clackamas County, have not necessarily received all we feel like we may not be receiving all the benefit from this collective, transit funding taking place, whether it's through the payroll tax, the TriMet payroll tax, or the STIF. And we've seen a shift, right, from the region center, everyone going to work there, to now a more spread out model where work centers are throughout the region. So I don't know if it's like how, as we move forward, if there's going to be more funding, what I want to see is more funding just going to the same old, where then we still lack transit, and our employees and our local businesses are paying into a program that employees aren't able to access. I mean, that's what we see here in my jurisdiction. And we're looking forward to some of the new service lines that Forward Together, what's the name, Forward something, is called, which is great. But I know Happy Valley, especially the same, the same thing, the further we get out into Clackamas County, especially here on the west side. So anyway, I just want to bring that up. I'm just nervous about just a thing that's add more transit funding without addressing the shift in how the region's jobs are spread geographically, and then in this kind of current lack of parity that we see region-wide in this transit funding.
Absolutely. I think that makes complete sense. Very good. We're going to transition on, stay on schedule the best we can. We've got a TPAC update from Ms. Bierg and Ms. Lorenzini. The floor is yours. And Jamie Stansky, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Jamie, do you want to just cover this in a real high level way?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Jamie Lorenzini, City of Happy Valley. I represent Clackamas City's TPAC alongside Dana Webb, Oregon City, and Will Farley, Lake Oswego. TPAC convened last on July 12th. The major topic was what are the next steps. Ted and Grace are doing a great job, and they've been very responsive to regional questions and concerns. Page 21 of today's meeting packet includes a 2-paragraph summary of next steps for agencies interested in competing for Step 2 competitive grants. The major thing to be aware of is the importance of the pre-app period. The pre-app runs from August 12th to the 23rd. And the pre-app itself is an easy breezy 1-page letter. And Metro has even done us the courtesy of providing us with a template. This pre-app letter will be the vehicle for requesting your local jurisdictional assistance. Moving on, the Tri-County experienced about 15 traffic deaths in June. Of this total, 5 people died while motorcycling, 4 while walking, and 1 while using a scooter. 1 fatality occurred in Clackamas County. Looking toward JPAC tomorrow, some things to be aware of include that ODOT recently secured a $450 million Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods Access and Equity Grant through USDOT for the Rose Quarter Improvement Project. The grant will fund the first phase of construction, focusing on the central highway cover element over I-2 or I-5. And the cover will be built to be forward compatible with future phases of work. TPAC recommended that JPAC approve a suite of MTIP amendments, the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, to program ODOT's grant award in advance a companion project from the City of Portland. And then finally, well, it wasn't on the agenda, tomorrow JPAC will receive information about phase 2 of the Regional Emergency Transportation Routes Project. A few years ago, Metro and the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, RDPO, partnered to reassess and update emergency routes for the 5-county Portland-Vancouver area. The revised network includes 195 total routes connecting over 75% of state and regional critical infrastructure and essential facilities. Phase 2 of the emergency transportation work will develop a tiering methodology and prioritization framework to inform which regional routes among the identified emergency transportation routes should be evaluated, cleared, and opened first, next, and last in a catastrophic scenario, and to guide ongoing maintenance and capital investments to ensure that top-tier routes are increasingly resilient. Over the next months, project staff are anticipated to assess the data and develop a tiering methodology. Are there any questions?
So
All right. Oh, I'm sorry, Karen,
I'm
please.
just going to re-highlight one of the things that Jamie said at the beginning related to the step 2 regional flexible funds. First of all, there is an opportunity for jurisdictions to get application assistance with their application. This is something new, but in order to do that, jurisdictions will need to submit a request in the August timeframe. And so we will be talking about this at the staff level, at our staff level coordination meeting at CTAX, to be able to reach out to all of your jurisdictions. But it is something that is new for this year. It's an opportunity to get assistance in developing the applications, which will ultimately be due in November. So those are a couple of the new steps that are a part of this Regional Flexible Funds project.
Very good.
Commissioner Chavez?
Yeah, my question, Jamie, you mentioned the Connecting Communities monies, and I'm aware of that. I just thought you all might want to know or be aware that the Rose Quarter project from a transportation side relies on transportation funding, obviously, whether it's federal, state, and whatnot, or local dollars can be used. But there's a constitutional limit for part of this project as it relates to the cover or the lid over that. And so this federal grant for $450 or so million is, you know, unique money. And it does, you know, there's no constitutional restriction on those dollars to build this project. My concern or question, maybe, you know, maybe it can't be answered tomorrow, certainly probably not this morning, is what is the actual cost? Do we know, you know, as close as possible, what that cost for the cover is going to be, and how the remainder will be funded? Will that be the city of Portland? Will that be more state money? Will that, or state money? How will that be? Where will those monies come from that don't fall under that constitutional restriction of gas tax dollars not being able to be spent on the cover? Sorry if that's confusing, but I just want to make everyone aware of that.
Very good. I appreciate that. And yes, still much uncertainty at this point. Okay, we are going to move ahead with the agenda. Next up, we've got Aaron Key from Metro giving us an update on the Urban Growth Report public comment period. Aaron, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'd like to invite Ted Reed to come and present too. So if you could make him part of the panel, that I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen. I chair MTAC, and MTAC starts at 9. So I might need to say goodbye a little bit before 9 to get ready to do that. So I'm going to start pretty quickly and get right into slides. Good to be back. I'm sorry to miss the pleasantries there. We were here in May. I was here in May giving you updates about the urban growth management process. So the good news is we're at a kind of a shifting point today. Just last week, the Urban Growth Report was released. And that means that's kind of symbolizes the conclusion of our collection of data and information and the beginning of the public conversation. using that data and information to inform a decision about whether the urban growth boundary should be expanded. Here's our calendar, so you can see what I'm talking about. We're right here at the seam here between the navy blue and the orange. And the orange indicates the decision-making process that leads to Metro Council making a decision in December of this year. So most importantly, that means MPAC making a recommendation to the Metro Council at the end of September. And let me show you all those important dates. This gives you an idea of the rest of the year here, so you can understand the schedule and understand how to be involved and where to share your opinions. The urban growth report is released right now. There's a public comment period. You can share that with your networks. It's really an opportunity to look at that data and information and share thoughts about the data. It's all presented in ranges and scenarios, so it does not point to an answer. It does not say whether the urban growth boundary needs to be expanded or not. It provides data that can be interpreted kind of with your own perspective based on where you land in those ranges. So that's where we are right now, and that comment period is open through August 22nd. So there's a good amount of time to participate in that. You can submit letters and emails. All the information about how to do that is on our website, and that I'm pretty sure I have that link here at the end of the presentation. You can expect that also at the end of August, our Metro's Chief Operating Officer will release a recommendation. So this is the version of a staff recommendation on the urban growth boundary decision. So this will be the first point that a draft decision about expanding the growth boundary or not is out there for folks to react to. So this is another great time to comment, is on that that COO recommendation and that is exactly what will fuel the conversations that begin at the end of August with MTAC and then into September with MPAC and council discussing the COO recommendation. MPAC will have 2 meetings in September, one on the 11th and one on the 25th. The first one to just talk about the COO recommendation, and the second one to continue that conversation and vote on an actual recommendation for the Metro Council. After that, Metro Council will have a public hearing on the COO recommendation, another opportunity to comment outside of the MPAC process if you'd like to. And from there, once those recommendations are made in September, then Metro Council will have its process going through October, November, and December. We have public notice and a lot of noticing requirements that will force that decision we're kind of anticipating that decision to be at the beginning of December. So I want to just summarize kind of all the engagement that's been happening. You know that I've been here. Ted and I have come and shared with you information. We've really made a big effort in this cycle of the urban growth boundary decision to be out and about talking about the data as it's coming together, instead of waiting till last week when the urban growth report was released and starting the dialogue then. So we were here sharing with you kind of how we do some of this analysis, taking your questions and explaining some of the early results. We did the same at MTAC, at MPAC, at Metro has a group called the Committee on Racial Equity, CORE. We've been participating with that group. We formed a roundtable, and this is who you see sitting around this table in the picture, are a variety of people from different industries, representing farming to environmental interests to real estate, housing developers, both focused on single family housing and those who focus on middle housing. So the roundtable was a really interesting place where we talked about all the methodologies used to collect this data and information, how we approach the challenge given to us by the state to make this determination about the urban growth boundary. We also, this was another new thing we did, was create a youth cohort. There's something like 16 young people. They're having their last meeting this afternoon or tomorrow night, learning about planning, learning about the urban growth boundary, and preparing if they want to testify on their own as individuals at the end of this process. Okay, so we've also been out and about visiting groups like yours, as well as private groups like the West Side Economic Alliance, the Home Builders Association. We've been to most of these groups multiple times, sharing the information along the way. And we've also sought out technical review. So MTAC is a technical advisory committee, and that's been one of the places we've been talking pretty much monthly for over a year now, presenting information. And we've also created a group called LUTAG, which is the Land Use Technical Advisory Group. This is primarily city staff, planners from jurisdictions around the region, but some professionals who work for private firms to look at our methodology, to question our methodology before we started using it, and then to review results. So for instance, we looked at capacity inside the urban growth boundary to accommodate land development for the future. And when we do that analysis of what's vacant and what's available for development, all of that information went to the cities and counties to review and to provide us feedback, and we made all the changes that we received. So that's LUTAG. And then we also brought in a special panel of economists and demographers to check our regional forecasts, so our estimations about growth in both people and housing and jobs in the future, and made sure that our assumptions about growth in industries were supported by state and national and academic professionals. So let me dive into the information. I think this is probably what we talked about a bit last time I was here. In housing, one of the big things that, of course, there's a variation in our estimations about future growth. That's presented on a range. We have a baseline of what we think the growth might be, but it could be lower, it could be higher. So that gives our decision makers a little bit of latitude to decide what they think is likely. But here's another set of scenarios that are really important to understanding the demand for housing in the future and what can be accommodated inside the growth boundary. And that's thinking about what kind of housing demand people will have in the future. So basically, a person who is 20 years old, 30, someone who's 30 years old right now, 20 years from now, they will be my age. Will they be living in this house just like I have chosen to and I had the opportunity to? Or will they choose a different kind of house? Will they choose middle housing? Will they choose an apartment? What will the choices be for them? And what will they be able to afford? What will work for their lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. I am a mother of 2, so there's 4 people in my family. Will this person who is 30 right now, will they have children and need the same size house? These are the kind of questions that we have to ask in order to anticipate what the people who we know are going to be in this region in 20 years, what they're going to be needing in terms of housing. And that different types of housing take up different space. So that's how it affects our calculations. So these 3 scenarios say, following in footsteps says, we expect it to be like it has been in the past. So as in my little scenario, that person who's 30 would be living in a similar house to me, likely. That's what they would want. On the other side, so that would say more single family detached housing. That's what I'm sitting in right now. Strong urban markets says that housing trends over the last decade, people having smaller household size, people having fewer children, people having lower incomes, people aging and being in retirement and therefore having lower incomes is going to push us towards smaller housing types. So we call this the strong urban markets scenario. So that's on the opposite side, saying we're going to need much more middle housing and multifamily than we have right now, because that's going to be the needs of the community. And then there's the middle ground, of course, which is we call the new normal, but it's a little bit of a mix, a lot like we've been seeing in the past, a little shift towards something slightly different. And so on this next slide, you can see how that plays out. So these are different, these different colors are different types of housing. The navy blue is multifamily, and the single family is in the turquoise or the teal. So that's the one you see changing the most. That and middle housing. Middle housing is in yellow. So number 1 is holding steady, being just like we have been historically. So it looks at historic trends, matches those historic trends. In the middle is, well, no, let's go all the way to the right. So all the way there on the right is that urban markets, strong urban market. So you can see much more multifamily. So that goes from 46 to 56. You see more middle housing from 14 to 21%, and the result is a lot less single family housing. So if you think that's the scenario, then this is what that mix would look like, and that affects the land need. Or if you think it's somewhere in the middle where you see about the same amount of multifamily that we've seen over the last several decades, and then more middle housing, that we'd see middle housing kind of take off a little bit in the future in the next 20 years. And that would essentially just steal that share from the single family market. And if you play these out to what the land need, these numbers show either that the need that can be met inside the growth boundary or a deficit. So deficits are shown in red. So there's two areas in which there could be a deficit, and those are both in the new normal scenario. So that scenario in the middle that assumes things slightly different than they are today. One demonstrating a need in multifamily. That's 2A, that's baseline growth, baseline capacity. And then the other option is 2B, which uses the new normal scenario, the baseline growth, but heavier use of single family detached housing. So that finds a single family detached and middle family need of about 2,250 units. So this is the data you're going to see in the urban growth report. Just like I said, it provides choices for our decision makers to decide kind of what they think is most likely to happen in the future, and to either find a deficit or no deficit based on those assumptions. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Ted.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. So the other part of the work that we do in growth management is not only looking at the needs for housing land, but for land to support economic growth. So I'm going to talk about two very general categories: commercial and industrial lands. There's some intermediate analytic steps we take to get to this point, but I'm basically just giving you the conclusions of all the work we've done in these two broad categories. Next slide, please. So on the commercial side, you'll recall that Erin mentioned our land use technical advisory group, how they helped us work through our methods for estimating how much land is currently in the urban growth boundary. So you see the results of that work that's been reviewed now by both that land use technical advisory group as well as cities and counties around the region. 480 acres of buildable commercial land currently inside the urban growth boundary. And then we hold that up against three different demand scenarios ranging from low to high. Baseline forecast is our most likely forecast. You can think of that as sort of the middle of this forecast range. And when we hold those two up against each other, the supply and the demand, we have a slight deficit for commercial lands under this baseline forecast, larger deficit under the high growth forecast. And really, I think the reason that we get to these deficits is because we simply start out with very little commercial land in the urban growth boundary as our starting point, that 480 acres. So it doesn't take too much growth in commercial jobs. So things like office, retail, those types of jobs. It doesn't take much to end up with a deficit here. So this is the result on this side. Next slide, please. So the other category I mentioned was industrial jobs. So these are all the manufacturing jobs, warehousing, distribution. Those all fit into this category of industrial. A similar layout here. So if you look at the capacity, this is the almost 6,000 acres that was identified currently inside the urban growth boundary, again, reviewed by cities and counties around the region, make sure we got it right. And then we hold that up against the demand, low to high forecasts again, with baseline being most likely forecast. We have a surplus under all three of these scenarios. I do want to note that we have a surplus in aggregate when we're talking about industrial acres. Many of these parcels are quite small, and while they have an important role in our economy, they help smaller businesses get started. they don't represent all of the potential need for industrial sites. We know that there may be unique demand for larger industrial sites, so we wanted to look at that question a bit more closely. Having concluded that in aggregate there are enough acres, we wanted to look at whether there are specific site characteristics that might be in demand. So next slide, please. So many of you may be familiar with this work that we've conducted with the Port of Portland, the Portland Business Alliance, the North American Industrial and Office Park group. So we've again updated this inventory with help from the consulting firm McKinsey. They did this in support of the Semiconductor Task Force. This is an inventory of sites that are 25 plus buildable acres for industrial uses. The tiering refers to the development readiness of these sites. Tier 1 is the most development ready, so likely to be development ready in 6 months or less. Tier 2 is likely to be development ready in 7 to 30 months, and then Tier 3 is 30 plus months to development readiness. Looking at this a little bit more closely for what we have in terms of sites that are 50 plus acres, it brings us down to 10 of these 50 plus acre sites that are that have relatively flat topography inside the urban growth boundary. 2 of those have some overlays that restrict their uses either for marine, industrial, or because of airport overlays. So we're down to 8 50 plus acre sites. And we wanted to refer then to the work of the statewide Semiconductor Task Force to have a sense of potential demand for large sites. Next slide, please. These are the conclusions of that statewide Semiconductor Task Force. And really this is predicated on achieving the type of growth in high-tech manufacturing that the state saw in the 1990s. If we saw that kind of growth, then these would be the site needs statewide. 2 sites of 500 plus acres, 4 sites of 50 to 100 acres, and 8 sites of 15 to 35 acres. So again, we wanted to provide a little bit more nuance to this discussion of industrial land need, having found in aggregate a surplus of industrial lands. We wanted to explore this question of whether there's a need for larger industrial sites. We do have this go around 1 proposal for an urban growth boundary expansion. Many of you will recall that we structure these processes around actual proposals from cities because we've had the experience of adding land without that city support. And in many instances, those areas have not developed in a timely fashion. So this time around, 1 proposal from the city of Sherwood includes an employment area to the north end of the urban reserve. This is the Sherwood West Urban Reserve. This includes about 130 buildable acres for what they call mixed employment, which includes some industrial and tech flex areas. The area does offer some potential for putting together some 50 plus acre industrial sites as relative proximity to the existing high-tech cluster up in Hillsborough. These are flat sites. So this is the kind of information that we're presenting to policymakers as they enter this next phase of decision making. Next slide, please. So policy options, we can move on. What we've concluded in the draft urban growth report is essentially the Metro Council has latitude to decide whether to expand the urban growth boundary or not, both on the residential side, but also on the employment side. So the council, with advice from IMPAC and our Committee on Racial Equity, could decide that there's enough land already in the urban growth boundary and not expand the boundary. Or they can find that there's a deficit of land and consider the Sherwood West Urban Reserve area as proposed expansion, and along with that, consider some conditions of approval to place on the expansion. So to get a certain housing mix or to protect those large industrial sites to make sure that they're used for that purpose. Next slide, please. Aaron, you want to take this or are you going to move on? You're muted.
Just a reminder of the schedule that you saw before. We've referred to these opportunities for MPAC weighing in. Just a reminder that that's in September. And we'll go ahead and here's the website. I know it's a little long, but you can also Google Metro UGB 2024 and you'll get to the same place. But that's where you'll find the Urban Growth Report. And all the technical appendices are there if you want to dig into the data and information. And there's information about how to comment as individuals, and you can discuss how to comment together as well if you'd like. And I'm going to go ahead and close it there. I need to step out, but Ted can stay for questions.
Very good. Thank you very much for the information. Appreciate the presentation. And I do think, Ted, I'm always kind of curious about this because I think you've handled the topic well in kind of looking at the excess of industrial land, but then why this potentially makes sense with Sherwood, because we're looking for the opportunity for larger parcels, and the sheer number of acres doesn't necessarily capture that data point in a way that would make sense to others. I think the question I have is when we look at from a broader perspective, commercial, industrial, in kind of the three growth scenarios, whether you're assuming baseline low growth or high growth really does, could very much impact this decision and future decisions as well. And so how does this get communicated to the Metro Council in a way that it's not just, hey, my gut says this, so we're going to make this huge sweeping decision based on what my gut says? How do we hone in on those growth scenarios in a way that the Metro Council can make a well-educated decision as they move forward?
Thank you, Councilor. So generally, I try to, as I'm describing these scenarios, always emphasize that the baseline forecast is the most likely forecast. The low and high forecasts are possible, but not as likely to occur as that baseline. And really, this boils down to you need to have population growth to have job growth. You have to have the workers. And part of what we didn't get into is this trend of declining birth rates. It's happening worldwide, nationwide. In Oregon, you all have probably seen this in the news. So this is very much a factor in how we're looking at future population growth and how that impacts job growth. So to get higher job growth, you really would have to have a lot more migration to the region to get there.
Very good. I appreciate that. Mayor Milch, did you want to ask a question, or shall I jump to
Well, I was just going to say, my question was similar. I noticed the only one scenario was if you assume the really strong industrial growth or employment growth, that you would need perhaps to add as much as you said 1,665 additional acres. And that's beyond what a city has requested. But I sense from your report a reluctance to do that without city approval. You're not just going to assume that scenario and say, well, let's add 500 acres in Damascus, for example, to get some of that industrial growth we need. All of this, but I think you clarified, you're thinking that fast growth is probably pretty unlikely. It's not going to guide the Metro's decision, the assumption of fast employment growth.
Well, that will be the Metro Council's prerogative to make that call. But as staff, we are emphasizing that the baseline forecast is most likely. But you are correct that Metro Council also does have a policy to only expand the urban growth boundary into areas, urban reserve areas that have been concept planned by a city. That's been the policy since 2010, really trying to make sure that if areas are added to the boundary, they produce the jobs or housing that were intended.
Very good. Councilor Stavanger.
Thanks. Appreciate the information. I have a question about the large site industrial needs and the buildable land inventory. So looking at that slide, I'm wondering what the property ownership distribution looks like. So across those tiers, how many of those sites are owned publicly or privately?
Yes, thank you for the question. Site assembly is certainly one of the issues that needs to be resolved to move some of those sites to a state of more shovel readiness. In some cases, we have sites that are owned by the Port of Portland. In other cases, these sites are under multiple private ownerships, and you need that patient investor, patient property owner to assemble them and to get them ready to attract a large site user. I don't have the specific breakdown at my fingertips though.
Well, I guess I'm wondering if those are publicly owned, if there's interest from the Metro Council, to connect them to some of the revenue that is available that can kind of spur that industrial development, that there might be some type of, I suppose there could be a public-private partnership as well. But I'm just wondering about how we would help to encourage to get those industrial lands online.
Yes, this is an ongoing theme with industrial site readiness that it will in many instances require public-private partnerships to invest in the infrastructure needed. So transportation funding is a big one for industrial sites. I mentioned the need for site assembly. We also have a need for wetland mitigation in some cases, brownfield cleanup. The Port of Portland has played some of that role over the years, but it is a challenging financial environment for them to do that.
Very good. Thank you for the information. Councillor Pratt, we're starting to wrap up, so I'll give you a quick one.
Okay, really quick. I just wondered if, since you specifically named Sherwood, I'm just wondering if this process considers the main feeder roads into these new areas, because like for Sherwood, that's Highway 99, which for decades has needed more room for the traffic that's on it.
So yes, the need for infrastructure investment is not going away. It's something that we need in our existing urban areas and definitely in any expansion areas as well. So that will be part of if the area is added to the urban growth boundary, part of the subsequent planning process to sort through some of those questions.
Very good. Karen, I saw your hand had been up. Did you have a comment? Nope. Okay. Very good. I'm going to get ready to call this meeting since we're already past the top of the hour. Ted, thank you so much for presenting. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
I know Aaron's gone, but thank you to Aaron as well for the time.
Sure.
With that, why don't we wrap this meeting? Our MPAC update, this was actually one of the main topics we did cover at MPAC at the last meeting. We also covered a housing update. Metro projects are building about 4,700 units of supplemental housing, et cetera. That's about 20% over their target. So at this point, things seem to be moving along relatively well. So with that, Commissioner Savas, any final words before we jump off? Very good. Always good to see all of you. Thank you very much for attending and have a wonderful, productive day. We'll see you again next time.
Take care.